Here we are, first day of winter in southern Idaho. Seems like a good time to talk about an island. Not the tropical variety, obviously. Hard to find those in Idaho. We're talking about Cougar Island in Payette Lake, nestled right up there in McCall. We told you about Cougar Island back in September, about the state of Idaho looking to sell it and then create funds per state code. Conservation folks across Idaho, they had concerns about selling state land to private owners. But after the saga through 2022, we now have the final vote on the island sale. Conservation advocates say it is a win-win-win situation. Here's Joe Paris.
Idaho Conservation advocates had major concerns about the future of this island on Payette Lake throughout the year 2022. Cougar Island is owned by the state, but Idaho is looking to sell the land to maximize financial return. Per state regulations, the Idaho Constitution requires the state land board to, quote, maximize financial return over the long term, mainly to benefit Idaho public schools. Scott Phillips with the Idaho Department of Land explained the thought process of the land board earlier this year.
In this case, with one lessee on the property, it really is an underperforming asset given the value of that property. So the land board made the decision in a very public way in 2018, and then again rediscussing that in January and February of 2021 through the Payette Endowment Land Strategy to sell the parcel, bring it to auction, and do something different with the proceeds to earn more money for our school children.
Conservation supporters worried that private ownership and development of the lots would compromise their conservation efforts. In the fall, everything was up in the air. The island went to a public auction where anyone could bid on the lots on the land. Another interesting aspect, a leaseholder of the lot with the cabin was at the auction to try and win the auction so his family could own the land instead of leasing it from the state. Well, that one lot,
2.52 acres for $2,025,000.
It sold for a little more than $2 million. Jonathan Oppenheimer with the Idaho Conservation League says that bid, it began a winning process for conservation advocates.
One of our partners within United Payette, which is kind of an umbrella organization of a number of community interests and stakeholders, a group called Payette Land Trust, worked with that successful bidder and the current homeowner to establish a conservation easement on his property. So it basically says there won't be any further development and his property won't be used to facilitate additional development of Cougar Island if and when the state does put some of those parcels back on the market.
Oppenheimer explains. The Payette Land Trust was able to contribute to the family's land purchase in exchange for a conservation agreement.
By having Payette Land Trust step in with some additional dollars, it helped him to actually close on his parcel. And so some dollars were contributed to that purchaser, and then that helped him ensure that he had the financing available to actually acquire that property. So it was a win-win both for the homeowner as well as for Payette Land Trust and conservation interests.
But that is only one lot on Cougar Island. What about the rest? Well, remember that auction? Only one piece of land sold there, so it's possible the state could try again in the future.
I think the big question is going to be, what's going to happen next year? What's going to happen a couple of years down the line? We continue to see a lot of development pressure in McCall and across the state, and so, as we see, the volatility in the real estate market, and if we see, prices start to skyrocket again, there's a chance that the Department of Lands could put some of Cougar Island or also Shellworth Island up on the market for a potential sale. And ultimately from Conservation League's perspective, as well as many, if not all, of the stakeholders in Valley County and McCall, we want to see that open space preserved.
So the golden question right now, we touched on this, will the state of Idaho again try to sell Cougar Island? And Brian, really what this comes down to is if the state of Idaho thinks they can make money off of it. As we touched on, the state board, their idea here is to take endowment land, make the most profit possible.
Right.
Selling it was a big idea, but there wasn't any buyers, as we touched on. So they'll have to go back to the drawing board. One idea conservation advocates have is try to turn Cougar Island to some type of recreational dollars.
Okay.
We'll see in 2023, though, what happens.
Still requires some infrastructure, somebody to kind of put the money toward making that a place where people would want to go, kind of thing. All right, we will see. Thanks, Joe. There's an update.